koutou and welcome to today's Finance and Performance Committee meeting. Just a reminder that we are recording today's meeting. I'll open us with the council prayer. Lord, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom and support as we begin this meeting. Fill us with your grace and help us remember that the decisions we make affect the real lives of your people. May we be ever respectful and treat our world as good stewards of your great gifts. As members of the governing body of our district, the Tararua district, please guide us to consider the most equitable solution to our problems, care for our valued employees, and be responsible, open and transparent with the financial resources entrusted to us by your people. Amen. Right, we have no one for public forum, but I do have Councillor Franklin, welcome, who's attending via Teams today.
Thank you, Worship.
Are there any notifications of items not on the agenda? Declarations of conflicts of interest? No. Confirmation of minutes. Can I have somebody move the minutes be true and correct record? Moved Councillor Johns, seconded Councillor Sutherland. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Right, we will move straight in. It is a very big agenda today, and I've got some times here listed of just how we think will go, so that we make those. So if we kind of just give you an opportunity just to move on, but we'll try and allow all of those questions. Right. So if we move straight into the reports, we're starting with the 6-month performance report. So welcome. Do we have Beth coming forward for this as well?
Morning, Your Worship and councillors and staff in the room. I'm going to be a little bit Mickey Mouse, I'm afraid, this morning, so that I'm not holding up other staff that are coming in to help me with little pieces of the management report. So if you don't mind, we're going to tackle external funding and then the pensioner housing deep dive. They're on pages 85 to 89 of your agenda. And I'll ask Adele to come and help Max out with this piece.
Your Worship and councillors. First, just briefly on external funding. I think I'll just take the report as read, and if you have any questions, please.
Sorry, with your page 85. Apologies, Sarah, I didn't pick up that you'd moved quite around in the way that you had.
That's 84 on in computers.
Yes. Councillor Johns.
Through Mayor Tracy, page 87, 3.7, digitisation and e-services, that's 600,000. Where are we at with digitisation?
Sorry, Councillor Johns, on which page are you on? Because I see, yep, no, it is 3.7, page 87. Yep, thank you. Sorry, Raj.
There's two phases to the digitization. This is looking at building package. The digitization project has got several other projects included in it, which is why we're at 600,000. Specifically, the project that we started off with the building package digitization projects. The team is currently going through the process of digitizing the building packets. At the same time, Mike and the team are looking at compiling and going out to the market to look at the solution that will make solution at the end that allow the building packet to be publicly available. So the project is progressing. I think there's a timeline in which the team is working towards, and it's being overseen and managed by the PMO.
Been going on for probably a year now. So has anything actually happened in the last year?
Yes, the team is progressing in converting the hard copy files, building packets in the digital form. So that's been progressing. So that's the first part of the project, to make sure that the packets are all in digital form. Then the second phase that's happening, which is the solution, the software package that we need to purchase, so that it's then allows the building packets to be publicly available to the public.
Old records, are they being done?
That's part of the digitization project. So the new contents that are coming through all in digital form, it is the old hard copy digital packets that the team is working on digitizing.
Haven't you received that money?
We received the first tranche, which is, I think, is 10% of the overall funding. And as we progress and consume the costs, we will seek reimbursement and draw down on the full amount. So the way in which DIA works is they give you the initial funding to kickstart the projects, and we are required to maintain costs as we incur those projects. And once we incur the cost as a monthly claim, we put that claim forward to them and we draw down on the full amount, or draw down on the amount.
Thank you.
With this, one further question. I'm mindful of what happened with the $2 million for footpaths in Woodville because of not getting on with the job, and then we ended up losing the money. And I'm just worried that under a new government, the changes may occur that we suddenly lose $500,000. Any unspent money just disappears. It concerns me. That's why I ask.
Noted. There is contracts signed for that, for those funding. Yeah. So, and there's been, this would impact every council in the country as part of it, and I guess it is an act of good faith. So we'll continue on. Councillor Wards and Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. I'm pretty focused on external funding. I like the fact we get that. So in 3.3, I appreciate we've had some discussion in the past around the funding for the Recovery Structure Office and Support and Recovery, but can I please, or we please, have an update on progress being made around the governance and the iwi partnership allocation and what we might be planning to do, because nothing's been claimed against this funding to date. So that area in particular, I'm keen to understand what we might be aiming to do and what the timeline on that might be, so we can actually claim against this money. Thank you, Wood.
There is some of that covered in this afternoon's infrastructure meeting as well. I did notice that Don Cameron had put some bits of information in there, but that would be as the iwi make claims to that fund. But actually, I can arrange to come back so that we've got that, because I have been monitoring that as well. Some of those, it's interesting that it hasn't been made in any of those areas. So, but Max, I think you're all over that in the criteria that is able to be claimed.
Yes, I understand that Brian and Don are having discussions with the Rural Support Trust on the Recovery Structure Office amount. And I'm sure that that's just part of it. And they'll also be working on the governance and iwi partnership funding and how we can use those funds as well.
Thank you. I'll follow that up, Councillor Wards, and get some understanding and have a talk on that. Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Just a couple of very quick questions just on the digitisation. Through you to Raj. Raj, you mentioned that 10% had been received. Just looking at the table we've been provided, it appears that no funds have been received for that project. Am I reading it wrong, or is it just not been updated?
So basically, the 10% we claimed, the 380, we have kind of allocated that to the future urban design project and the building iwi capacity. I guess that's the way I guess we could transfer some funding, but we've notionally attributed it to those other two projects, and it's really just a matter of us. I would say for like the digitisation project, as at the 30th of June, we'll basically calculate the staff costs and put a claim in for to date, for year to date, and put a claim in against our costs.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. And I think it's more goes to Councillor Johns's comment before. Some of us around the table might be a little bit nervous with some of the external funding. So if parts have been claimed, perhaps a note, I understand the allocations might need to be made in a different way. But I suppose looking at the figures on here and then hearing that 10% has already been drawn down, when it's not reflective, it's just quite helpful if we're going to be monitoring to be able to see that part of it.
Brian, do you want to just make some comment around the contract? Okay.
So through you, Mayor Tracy, we have no concerns around the viability of this fund. There's been actually assurances through that this will continue and the funds are there available. So it's certainly from within all of the connections and officials that we speak with on a regular basis, and Mike does, there's been no indication of that. And we will pay down things as we incur costs, and each project will move at different paces to the others. So I think there's actually, in terms of how we're allocating it, there shouldn't be any real concerns in terms of that. I think the finance people will ensure that they correctly apply it to the projects as they are required.
Thank you. I'm sure you've heard the concerns, around the table on that. I just had one further one in the 3.8, other funding, the food secure communities. I noticed that was externally funded, but actually, not all the funds were spent. Was there any reason for that, or what happens to those funds? Do they have to be given back and returned?
So that project there, basically the project was completed under budget, and so yes, we will need to return those funds. Yeah, so we will need to, and in fact, I see that the completion date for that was December of last year. So I have spoken to Colin, and he said yes, those funds will be returned.
Thank you. Are there any further quick questions around external funding? Otherwise, we will move on to pensioner housing. This is a deep dive that I had asked for because I had some concerns around the self-funding aspect of that, and just watching some growing requests and numbers and staff time. So the team have put this information here. Does anyone have any queries, or did you have anyone speaking to this, Sarah? Del? Thank you.
Through your worship, firstly, I'm just going to take the report as read, and there's a lot of detail and a lot of, 5 water cylinders here and whatnot. Basically, there are just a couple of things I wanted to point out. So this year, the general maintenance budget for pensioner houses is $127,000. Now that was a significant jump from previous years. In previous years, that maintenance budget had been like 50, 60, 50, so a very low level. So the budget for this year had increased, and also the budgeted renewals was also a significant amount this year of 389,000. So when you look at what we've spent, what has been spent to date, they are large numbers, but the converse is that in the 2024 annual plan budget, there were also large numbers budgeted for a lot of this work. I think the other important thing to note is that we expect that the pensioner housing reserve will be overdrawn as at 30th of June 2024. And that was also basically, if you looked at the annual plan budget, it would have been overdrawn by roughly the same amount. So I'm going to leave it there because I know that there will be a lot of questions.
Thanks, Max. Councillor Wards, Councillor Johns, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Yes, you're right. There will be a few questions. I appreciate your explanation around, you know, the overspend and how that might have happened, but it does concern me when I circle comments and words in 4.2.3, you know, a reserve balance is nil, an internal loan will be required. There will need to be planned program maintenance. And my question is, did we not have planned programmed maintenance? That is seen obviously a lack of refurbishment and maintenance, and it's got us into that state now. So my one and only question around this one is, did we not have a plan?
Not to the extent that was required. And that's the work that the team are looking to build, the program of work, so that we are keeping on top of it. We do have quite an old housing stock, and some of it has not been maintained to today's standards. So absolutely, we have let that slip, but are needing to get on top of it. I think it's important to understand the reserve has not been sufficient. It doesn't generate sufficiently over time. There's not enough coming into there. And yeah.
Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Yes, of the roughly $16,000 that was spent on flat inspection, seems a lot of money. I just wondered what was involved in that inspection process.
For some of that, we have had builders or external people with the capability to look at the housing stock appropriately, looking for things like asbestos up in the roofs, things like that. Those are skills that internally we don't have.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy, and thanks very much for the report. Some interesting info in there, but one part that I'm really keen to get a greater understanding of is the extra costs in relation to pensioner housing that perhaps aren't reflected in here. So some of the staff costs and the staff allocation that's required to be able to manage our pensioner housing. And I suppose that goes right down through to contracting to do maintenance around the properties, to go and change light bulbs, but also through you, Mayor Tracy, to Adele, through to your team of actually having to run the portfolio. And I think that those staffing costs perhaps would paint a much clearer picture to us as to what those budgets are looking like. And if we're looking at perhaps dipping outside of our budgets, it might be quite telling. So wondering if there was any work that's already been done on the staffing allocation and the extra costs in relation to it.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. I at the moment, because the state that the portfolio's in and the work that we need to do to get it to a state where it is manageable, there is a lot of staffing allocation going into there, and a lot over and above what we've probably allocated in the budget. But the work we're doing to get it right is looking at the agreements that we've got in place and phasing out some of those historic things that we have done, like the changing of light bulbs, batteries and smoke alarms, those sorts of things. Those they're quite time intensive for us to work one-on-one with the pensioner to help them to understand these things are going to be phased out of their current understanding of the agreement. So that's going to take some time. And then we need to get the maintenance up to a state where it's less time for our team to be dealing with that. But we do believe once we've got a housing stock that is well maintained and a better understanding of our pensioners in those, and rates that are capable of meeting the maintenance demands, then we should get things right. But it is going to take us time to get that right.
Thanks very much for that, Adele, and completely appreciate the challenges within the portfolio, and delighted to see that a plan's kind of getting put in place. I suppose putting aside the fact that there has to be a huge amount of resource put into it now to get into that standard, it's getting an understanding of what business as usual potentially will look like with staffing costs, and hopefully there's been some work on projecting that. And the reason why I say it is this council is going to have to make some decisions in relation to rent for those properties, and I'm quite passionate about pensioner housing, but also quite passionate about the need for them to be truly self-funded. So that work might not be available for today, which is fine, but I guess just signalling that I would really like to see that to be able to help inform that conversation.
I've just got a small comment on that.
Just to talk about overheads, it's a good point mentioned about staff, but I think the way in which when we draw up the budgets is we do what we call overheads allocation. So we just don't take staff that are in the facilities team that are working pension and housing. We also take overheads across the organization there where it's supporting or contributing or helping with the pension housing, meaning support from finance, looking at insurances, looking at power. So all elements of support gets allocated as part of our funding process. If you recall, in terms of setting the rates, we look at overheads allocation. So that's captured. So when we set the fees for pension and housing, we do include the overheads in, because that needs to be recovered like any other activity through the fees and charges or through rates, but in pension and housing, we're saying self-funding. So it should all be recovered from the fees. Yeah.
Sorry, just before I come to you, Councillor Wallace, can I just check in with Raj? So that includes in those overheads the mowing and the rubbish services that they also receive?
Thank you, Tracy. That's picked up in our maintenance budget, the costs of those services.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. First of all, congratulations to the work that the team's doing. You've got to be careful on which lens you look this through. For example, everyone's about the costs. Well, you've got to remember your stock's old. So, take, for example, I lost a hot water cylinder last week, $1,700. And it only lasted 23 years. Remembering all your stock is old. So, in a perfect world, nobody worries about it when it's well. And that's across our whole infrastructure. We've got a lot of legacy stuff going on. And you can't, we want to cover costs, but would you have said to the pensioner 40 years ago, oh, we're now going to pay more, because we didn't know the costs going forward, over time. And they've quadrupled, or even, well, look at somebody trying to get a house today. So please be careful when you look at these figures. You've got to look at them holistically and in the full picture of time, because over time it will self-right itself, because you won't have to go back and change those hot water cylinders next week, or those, you know what I mean? And I think the proactive work that your team, our council team's doing now, is exceptional.
Thank you, councillor Wallace. The reason that I've asked for this to come to the table is that there is a very clear policy that the pensioner housing is self-funding and that other ratepayers aren't subsidising that. So this is what we're looking to. I also have, I guess, for peace of mind, I will need to know that, you know, these inspections are yearly. We've got a responsibility to be a good landlord, and ensuring that we do that. Is yearly inspections enough? Is that working for our insurance policy? And are we waiting for a year before we're picking up some of that maintenance? So I'm pleased that they brought this work to the table. I'm just going to go to councillor Peter Weber because we are on tight time.
Sorry, just quickly. Have we ever thought about getting like a part-time maintenance person? Like just like on a, that they could do like the heat pumps and smoke alarms and that type of thing. I don't know. I'm just putting a suggestion out there. Something to think about. Could be a road sign builder or something.
Thanks, councillor Peter Weber. The light bulb ones I don't have an issue with, but and removing those from the contract, but the smoke alarms is actually part of our responsibility and an insurance check, you know, for insurance purposes as well. So that one there I did know. Councillor Johns.
Do we depreciate these assets?
Yes, through Mayor Tracy, we do depreciate and we don't fund them like we do the other assets in terms of depreciation funding. We unfund the depreciation expenses of funding. We recover the renewal elements and factor that into the fees and charges.
There's no separate depreciation fund. Sorry, no depreciation fund to cover renewals. Is that what you say? Is that what I understand?
So what happens is we I guess we charge a notional, a depreciation charge to pensioner housing, but the other side of that actually goes into their reserve funding, goes into their reserve balance. It's a slightly, I don't, Sarah, you might have a better way of describing that.
Okay, and through Mayor Tracy. So in a normal activity, there's a depreciation expense and council decide how much of the depreciation expense you want to fund. For example, in roading, we say we fund our share, which is 23%, or in buildings, our share is 100%, we fund it. In pension housing, there's an expense because accounting treatment is an asset, you're expensing it, it's an expense, but we don't fund that as we normally do. We then, when we calculate the fees and charge, the rental, we factor those elements in to say how much do we need in terms of the renewal profile that we have, how much we want to put aside in capital development, then we determine. So what's balance left in the activity goes into the reserve, which is the housing reserve, and any renewal expenses, it will be taken from the housing reserves, not from the council depreciation reserves. So that what Max is saying, if the housing reserve is depleted, then we need to trigger what you call an internal loan and fund that. So it's quite a different reserve. The operational renewals, capital expenditure for housings will all be funded from either the operational revenue or from the reserves, which is pension housing reserves.
Councillor Sutherland, then councillor Morse.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Just a quick, a look at the context of this too. I do appreciate Steve touched on some points that were very relevant, but it wasn't too long ago that the council around here decided to sell these, get rid of them, and then the next council decided that was wrong and we've got them. But I was on the council that decided to build 6 new pension units, and I think on reflection, had we known the full extent of the maintenance and issues ahead of us, we might not have gone down that track. So we did have 900,000 sitting on a reserve then, which would have filled the hole while we fixed this up, but we didn't, we built. And no, I just have to look back, and now I wonder whether we should have, but we did. So it's now catch up. And there's issues, the laws change, the standards for healthy homes are there. There's a real expectation that the service is much better, and so I think Adele and her team are trying to rectify that, and it might take some time, and there'll be some money pressure on this account. But we do have a a duty to get the standards up, and we have to adhere to the healthy homes regime with the new government and insulation and quality. So we'll have a buffer of cost here for a little while. But I think I think we're on the right track while we hold on to the stock. Anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. And part of those conversations back when those decisions were made, was around bringing those homes up and change and being a good landlord. But actually, I'd like to see more reporting through, when you're looking, what is the plan renewals? We're learning some of this now. So I actually think better reporting through so that we understand that these things are happening would be good. And I can remember those comments being made at that time. I think it was Councillor Sutherland. Councillor Wallace.
No, Councillor Sutherland covered off on exactly what I was going to say about the laws change.
Yeah, and I think another aspect that the team's identified is far better asset management, so asset planning, so ensuring that data does go into the RAMs, and then we can plan for the future. And like Councillor Steve said, we never really know when a hot water cylinder, but if we get this information stored into it, and so asset management for our facilities has been less than ideal, I guess I can say, over the time. So when that decision was made, the staff probably didn't know the extent of it at that point either, because they wouldn't have had that loaded in their asset management planning and through RAMS. So that's a big thing that we're going to be concentrating on going forward to ensure that we get really good data. But there's got to be a starting point, and Jess McKenzie did start, this a wee while, but as Adele said, it's going to take a while to actually get all this information and get a really good understanding of it. But they are getting older as well, and things will cost more with whether it's an old car or old house. They tend to need more maintenance, but we try and bring that up to standard, do really good condition assessments on a regular basis and feed that information into our asset management.
Thanks, Brian. And look, I certainly support that. I'm just looking at this from a governance perspective and understanding, in deferred maintenance, how are we seeing this? What were we planning and getting better at this going forward? Because nobody wants this and it is a cost. Councillor Wallace? Happy? Okay. If there's nothing further on pensioner housing, we'll move forward into the operational performance. So items 4 to 6, pages 8 to 18. It's something that I've been looking forward to. I think we've still got some more to do, but as I said, we have 2 roles and responsibilities that I see in pensioner housing. The first one is to the service that we provide and the people that we care for. The other is to adhere to the policy. And we're going to have some tough conversations around rents as we go forward too.
Please go to the next page.
When Raj and I met with me, Tracy, earlier in the week, Raj had this great idea to utilise the televisions within the council chambers, and I'm pretty excited to get something together. So we are now back on track, and I'm not going to make you divvy dive throughout the rest of the report. We're just going to carry on from start to finish now. Beth is going to cover off operational performance. I will touch on service performance measures. Mike will jump up to the table, and he will hopefully not jump up to the table, but he will cover capital expenditure. Beth will jump back into treasury, and then I've asked Ellie to cover us off on the debtors report.
Me, Tracy, and councillors. So if I just talk to the executive summary dashboard on page 9, which is up on the screen, you'll see that our operating performance shows that we have a surplus of 5.2 million, better than budget. As Max had covered off earlier, majority of that is due to the external funding that we've received, mainly from Cyclone Gabrielle funding for Wakatahi for Route 52, and as well as the unbudgeted funding for the Mayor's task force. Those sources of funding will be netted off against the expenditure side of things. In terms of our operating expenses, we are showing a on page 10. And sorry, I've jumped the gun. I'm a bit out of practice, so I'm going to take this report as read. So please feel free to jump in and ask any questions along the way. I'm in my own little zone sometimes. So yeah, and expenditure wise, we are looking at $12 million unfavourable. But also that is due, if we refer back to the revenue side of things, with the impact of Cyclone Gabrielle and the emergency works that have taken place. 13 million of that is on our roading network. So that's where a majority of our expense the variances are in the emergency and roading space. I guess I can go through and highlight the significant variances through the report, which we have done a high level detail through now in the new section of the report. I hope everybody's read that, comfortable with that. So I can just go, I can just talk about the high level detail. So we've talked about the funding side of things and the operating costs. One of the main drivers, as I said, was the roading network, Cyclone Gabrielle, but we've also got consultancy costs across council that are tracking less than budget. And this is due to vacancies being filled in the regulatory space with the solutions team not being utilised as much because we've got those roles fulfilled. Insurance costs haven't been at 31 December, hadn't been, what's the word I'm looking for? Incurred, that's the word, thank you, Sarah. So they have since now been expensed against the activities, so they will be reflected in the third quarter report. The other expenses, maintenance costs, so those are kind of cyclical in nature and they're dependent on when the maintenance work needs to be carried out on each of the plants and other assets. So even though we budget for them as, I suppose, as we see they would fall due, it's kind of like crystal ball gazing, so we can't really accurately determine when a repair work is going to be done. So they would fall into the extraordinary maintenance costs. So we've got the budget there for it, just to in anticipation of any repair works done. But if they're not needed, then obviously we're not going to use that budget. Do we have any questions so far?
Thanks, Beth. I just did want to highlight before I come to you, Councillor Wallace, most residents are experiencing around a 30% increase in their insurance. Just to highlight that council's increase is 50%, which is huge. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah. Through you. Yeah, Tracy. That 536, even 800,000 under budgeted. Over under budgeted.
Yeah. Can you give us the page number?
Page 11, page 12, and the number is 5.3.6.
Okay.
Of the report. 5.3.6, page 11, going down onto page 12. Just explain that for me, please.
So you're asking about the operating costs?
Under budget.
Yeah, being under budget. Yeah, so that's a real good plus. So that I mean, you know, 800 grand. I mean, wow.
Worship, Councillor Wallace, I don't mean to steal the win from underneath sales, but I'm going to steal the win from underneath sales. It's, as you can see from the brief explanation, we've got audit fees that have not come across. That's quite a chunk of the 793 off the top of my head. And then other costs, management fees, there is a decrease in our management fees if we look to the transfer stations in particular, which we'll get to in the deep dive. But we're under budget at 31 December. And throughout each of the individual activities, I've highlighted where we are within each of the individual activities. And I've tried to give you a guide as to where we're expecting that activity to land at year end. And if I recall correctly, I'm anticipating 99% of these activities, if not all of them, to be on budget at year end. So I'm going to fully spend that money. Well, not me personally, but the team is going to fully utilise that money before year end.
So that's calendar year, not financial year end. Thank you.
Gilmore?
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. I think just having a look, I've just got a couple of kind of overall questions, if that's okay. The first part of it is I noticed there were a couple of points where things weren't meeting budgets because subscriptions were due. So that was in libraries and support, I think, jumped in. When we're doing our budgets, do we look at when subs are meant to be falling due, and is that something that we could forecast better?
Through your worship, yes, we can. At the moment, we budget within, we have two financial systems we run which calculates the budget, if I'm honest. The one in which this team budget is called, I'll call it BIS, that's my everyday terminology for it. We phase it, the managers are asked to phase their budgets in accordance with when they anticipate the spend to be. The default is monthly should they've not done that step. Some managers are better than others in that space. But then when we take the budgets out of BIS and we put them into our planning model, which calculates our rates and all that jazz, which you're pretty familiar with, having gone through a couple of long-term plan workshops with me, that will then just take the total figure. So we then need to phase it back into our reporting system. So it's kind of, yes, we can, and it's a work in progress. And where we can identify it, we do try and correct it.
Thanks very much. Through you, Mayor Tracy, to Sarah, I appreciate that. It would be really helpful for us from a monitoring perspective to try and see that coming, because there are some quite big variances. Obviously we have some high level subscriptions. My other quick question there is, this is a number of our activities. We are slightly down because of staff. We've obviously carrying vacancies, so we haven't spent as much money on staffing costs, and a number of areas where it's a relatively significant amount. My question though is if that's the case, we're sort of halfway through the year, why would we be expecting to see things being on budget at year end rather than showing a favourable variance?
Through you, your worship, it depends on the activity would be my best comment for that. Some activities where we are carrying vacancies and the team don't have the capacity to complete the work, we are having to bring in consultants or the likes. So you might have an overrun in consultants offset by a savings in employee costs. So I think solid waste would be the perfect example of that, where we've brought that service in-house. So your employee costs are going to be overspent compared to budget at year end. However, you're going to have savings within your contract costs or your management fees to offset it. So I guess when I refer to the activity and it's whether it's on track or not on track for year end, it's in its entirety. So there are lots of different things at play. And if an activity is going to have an overspend in, I don't know, for example, if I go wastewater with sludge disposal or something of the likes, we do highlight that, but we do try and make sure that the team stick to their bottom line in totality.
Councillor Wards is patiently waiting, Councillor Gilmore.
It's on the same exactly. Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Totally appreciate that with contractor costs. An example would be the governance area, which is reflected in the report of being, I think it was 26,000. So I guess it's understanding that we've had staff that have had to carry that and be under pressure to be able to do that. And I'm sure there's other areas. It's just using that as an example. It's me just trying to get my head around why in the next 6 months would we be looking at spending another 26,000 on top of what was already budgeted.
I will, sorry, I take your comment on board and we will better reflect the commentary to not have sorts of concerns, I guess, or better explain it for you. Yeah, bit more context. Yes, appreciate that.
Councillor Wards and Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of big picture questions. Did we receive a first quarter report? So finding an arrow that says compared to the last quarter is not very helpful for me. However, in saying that, I would seek reassurance that the next quarter will be reported, because there's some big swings here that have happened in the last 6 months. Now, another big picture comment would be, you know, in the absence of all that external funding and obviously the operating costs that went with it, I'd like to kind of get a feel for where are we sitting? What would our BAU without Gabriel have looked like from a financial perspective? And I guess my final comment, because you've provided plenty of detail here, would be things are sneaking away. And I don't like seeing words like we'll be on budget when I look at a graph that's showing this is all we've spent so far and this is what we've budgeted to spend. And I guess I'll reflect on that a little bit more in the capital side. This is not, I'm not sitting comfortably with what we've rated to perform on and what we've performed on financially. Now, there are explanations and I really appreciate that. Timing, all of that. I'm not sitting here very comfortable with what I'm seeing here 6 months on and knowing what we've got ahead of us to be able to deliver on with the personnel gaps that you've all identified, and with, I mean, Mayor Tracy's obviously done the same calculations later on with insurance that I did. I was absolutely horrified. Those are big ticket items that are jumping out at us now, 6 months on, when we've only got another 6 months to try and turn it around. Thank you.
Through Mayor Tracy, it would help Councillor Watts give me an example, like a bit of context, so that I can explain some of your concerns about what you're seeing here. Because when I'm looking at this table that the team has prepared, I'm looking at the column, which is the year end. So what the team has done is looking at where we are in the 6 month and looking at what has happened and what's coming up in the discussions. The managers are saying that this is where that activity in terms of its planned revenue and planned expenditure is going to be at year end. So if I'm seeing, for example, if I'm seeing roading as an example where the planned expenditure, it's a rate, meaning that we are going to be above budget, then the question the team has followed up with the managers is, why is that the case? And for that activity, the explanation is because of Cyclone Gabrielle emergency works funding. So it's not the BAU that is gone. And I think if I look across the other activities, in a sense where there hasn't been an impact of Cyclone Gabrielle or things that has happened that is not in the budgets, I'm seeing a green. So I'm saying that the team has come back and says, yep, we are doing a BAU, we're going to be on track in terms of our expenditure and the revenue. So where there's amber, I think the team has indicated there's going to be slight difference. So what the team has attempted to do in the report is the detail is to explain what that amber and what that red is so that you can understand what's driving that variance from a plan, which is looking at revenue and expense. So I guess if looking at that and your concern that we're not meeting our plan, I guess, and a context and example so that the team and I can provide some assurance to you or follow up on your concerns.
Thank you, Raj. And I don't disagree. I guess I'm more concerned about the monitoring role that we have as governors, that we've had an absence of information for 6 months. We've got 6 months to turn around some of these flags and some of those X's on that dashboard. What might the picture look like in 3 months? And a really good example was the comment around the subscriptions. There might be a heap of money being gained and spent in the next 3 months that will be reflected in the March quarterly report. I don't know that yet. All I'm picking is that from this, we've got a reassurance from the team that we're going to be on track. There's a couple of areas and we can explain it. I don't have a concern about it. I guess I'm just emphasising the point. What I don't know, I can't advise, act on, or direct. I'm reassured that the level of inspection is happening, but as governors, we haven't had that opportunity to be able to reinforce actually, no, we're going in the wrong direction on that one. We need to perhaps pull back the. So, and there are areas in there that, could get away on us, but obviously the team have looked into where those might happen. And have provided. I'm just reinforcing the fact 6 months on, this is the first time I've had an opportunity to be able to look at it.
Thanks, Councillor Wards. Beth.
Tracy. Thanks, Councillor Ward, for your comments. We'll take that on board for the third quarter report, and we'll probably try to add more clarity on what our BAU is and differentiate it with any extraordinary work such as Cyclone Gabrielle. Taking on board your comments, I'd just like to, I guess one of the feel-good points from the OPEX analysis is that if we look at the animal control activity, we are currently tracking above what was budgeted, and that's due to the work that Jim and his team have done in that area and proactively going out and visiting the farmers and getting buy-in from them to register their dogs. So there is assurance there that BAU has been done. I also did a quick analysis on the water supplies. So if we take out the fluoridation funding that we received, which was about 400K, our consumption for this time, for the 31 December compared to last year, compared to FY23, our consumption was down, but our revenue was up. So those are reflected in our fees and charges. So the team is constantly reviewing, I guess, areas that we can recover costs.
Thanks. And also, I think too, we do have a no surprises policy here, and I know that if there was anything there that they would flag that to us as well. So thanks, Sarah. And then I'm going to go to Councillor Johns.
I just wanted to chat about the previous result. I am aware that we did not present a first quarter report, and with that missing, I have tried to be extremely detailed in the 6-month report to give you that peace of mind. Just on the screen right now, the previous quarter result is as it was tracking at 30 September. I have put that in because I thought it was a useful exercise for you to know we did still track, we are still monitoring, just to give you that reassurance that we are still working and we, yeah, just wanted to give you a bit more detail, I guess, so that you did get that reassurance.
Thanks, Sarah. Ryan, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, well, I think it's just sort of reiterating what Sarah said there. So managers aren't blind to this either. So we are in positions that, you know, you put me in a position and EL into a position where we interrogate our budgets as well. As you all know that councils are complex organisations and we can't streamline budgets perfectly in terms of getting that even spread across the 12-month period. It's just simply impossible. But what we try and do is show you a bit of forecasting around that. And look, we could do 101 other things to improve that. That does take time and effort. And certainly with a busy finance team, we do need to prioritise where that effort is best spent. And they have been under the pump over the last sort of 12 months with the financial reporting, the LTP, annual plan, annual report, capital programs, Cyclone Gabrielle. I could go on. So, you know, just could probably keep this in context. I'm satisfied with what's been presented, and we have had meetings around this and the work that they've done. But if there's anything specifically that you have real concerns about, then feel free to raise them with me.
Thanks for that assurance, Brian. I think they're doing all of that and you're still one team member down too, so acknowledge that. Councillor Johns, then Councillor Gilmore.
I see. Firstly, Beth took the words out of my mouth regarding the animal control side of things, and I think it's good to read that. And I'd like the team there to be informed of our appreciation of the work they've done. Good to read. The other thing is, a few weeks ago we discussed insurance very briefly, with a view, I think, to holding some discussion as to whether we should insure at all, or some things that could not be insured as opposed to others. Is there a plan to have that discussion?
Yes, I believe it's been booked in for an afternoon in March.
Through Mayor Tracy, I'm just reading the correspondence with Stephen with Aon. It's scheduled for the 26th of March.
Councillor Gilmore.
And thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thank you very much for the report and the detail that has gone into it. From my perspective with this is a really key function. I know I've mentioned this before, of our duties as governors to be able to actively monitor the work that is going on or how we're tracking towards our budgets. So I guess my question, Councillor Wards has kind of covered some of my thoughts, but my direct question with it is, can we get an assurance that we will be getting these reports every quarter going forward?
Through your worship, you've all had the privilege of meeting our systems accountant, Gavin. He has done a wonderful job for us coming back from the Christmas break, and he has reinvented the wheel for us on our reporting tool, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's user friendly, it's double click, it's everything I could hope for and more in a spreadsheet. So it's, yes, we could give you this on a monthly basis, just don't ask me for the detail.
Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Not really a question, sorry, but just I was looking at the financial reporting for the 6 months, and I must admit, I was as I do, I like to look at across the board. So I did browse at a number of other councils' reporting styles and the method of presentation, and this was very, very common. This was very similar to a lot of them, and some of the bigger ones. I looked at Wellington and Whanganui for a couple of examples. One or two little things out of those I picked I quite like the look of, and I might talk to Sarah at some other stage, just the way they were set up with some of the debt the debt ones I quite like, the graphs like, but I must admit, I felt quite reassured that a number of councils are very identical to this in their presentation and their explanation. So I felt okay about that, actually. Sometimes it's a bit hard. I must admit, it is hard sometimes when you're trying to judge where we are with money that hasn't come in or hasn't been allocated, and it skews it. But I think getting the assurance from Raj and the team is good. But the presentation style is pretty identical to many councils. So
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. And if you can flick those graphs through, and then we could see what can be like. That'd be great. Councillor Wallace.
This is not a complaint, it's a question through you, me, Tracy. Page 9, going forward, and I'll be bringing this up again this afternoon. We've been gifted these great laptops, but they are definitely not friendly, because you get a sore neck and you go like that and it goes around again. So I think we've got the science within this room to keep that, maybe split the page in two and put them across two. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, councillors, just if I can go back, my omission, I'd like to move that the management report recommendation that we received the report on page 85 be accepted. Thank you, Councillor Wards. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Sorry about that, Ellie. Right, councillors, we'll go through the next part of this, which is the service performance on page 18 to 21, and then we will adjourn for 15 minutes. We can keep this succinct. We are a little bit behind on time. Okay.
Through you, Your Worship, I tried to follow the same sort of approach I've done in the operational performance space, I guess. And throughout your attachment, I've tried to give reference to what the performance was at the first quarter, just because I was quite conscious that we had the information, but it wasn't externally provided. So I have tried to give you quite a bit of detail. If I just go to page 19, I guess the number one, the table right up the top, it shows how we're performing. At 31 December, council was meeting 71% of its service performance measures compared to 70, and I have said that we were only on track to achieve 61 in the first quarter. I've highlighted the key mandatory measures that I personally take an interest in because of audit at the end of the day, and they're really good key pieces of information for you to have. And then we've given quite a bit of detail around the community survey, and I found it quite interesting by giving you the comparison to 30 September and then where it was showing at 30 June as well. So rather than me go through it, I know that this is a topic that we all want to discuss, and I know we're all going to have quite a few questions. Raj, could you just go to the next page? I ran out of time, I guess, is probably the best answer I have to this. So I think I showed you in a finance and performance meeting late last year the work that Dan, our BI, our IT whiz, had been doing in this space, and I want to make sure that I'm including some of his stuff moving forward. So Ellie, I apologise, it is on the screen and it's not in the report, but this is the information he's taken from 2019 through to 2024, and he has it all in the tool for us. So it's quite a good pictorial, I guess, to show how we're tracking, and it's some of the information that we don't actually report individually within the service performance report as well. So I'll look to include this in the reports moving forward. But if it's all right with you, me, Tracy, I'll just take questions.
This is fantastic because it puts everything on one page that you can see it, but there's a definite trend there, councillors. There is a definite trend that needs addressing, so I've got quite a bit on that. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Page 19 covers the DIA's requirements for water testing and so on. Are we not in a position to go back to DIA and say, if you want us to test every 30 seconds, 7 plants, or however, and that's going to cost us money, we say to them, well, this is going to cost another $1,500 a week. If you wish to cough up $1,500 a week, we'll do it. Otherwise, we're quite happy with what we're doing. Now, are we in a position to do that?
This was direction new regulation that was set. However, I had a conversation yesterday with the chair of Audit and Risk, and one of the things is, as a New Zealand Inc, we haven't had this conversation, but we have got gold star standards that are very, very difficult for us to meet when it comes to affordability. So I think there is, in water testing, safety is absolutely paramount. But actually, in some of the requirements that we need to meet in the regulatory space and wastewater and water going forward, actually they are unaffordable. So there are some wider conversations to be had politically. So, but in the meantime, we must abide by the rules. Happy to take you with me for a visit to Parliament.
We need to put pressure on and lead the way. I mean, we're one of the worst councils insofar as the number of water treatment plants per head of population in the country. It affects us worse than anyone else, I suspect. And we need to lead the way. Just say, look, we're not going to provide this information until such time as you pay for it.
Take on board your comments, Councillor Johns. We certainly need to lead the way, but I probably just need a few less red flags in some of these areas, and to ensure that we are meeting what we need to meet as well. So, but absolutely share those costs all the time, and I think there is a conversation to be had around that. Yeah, Sarah.
I was just a little bit more information. Raj and I met with Debbie when we were discussing the long-term plan and service performance measures in this space. DIA have not adjusted the measure for the change with so we have to report on both, because the DIA measure is based on the old regulations, but we have to report to Te Mara Arawai under the new regulations. The conversation we had with Debbie was Audit are pushing back on DIA because they weren't revisiting that measure for the upcoming LTP, because Three Waters was no longer going to be sitting at local government level. So the auditors are pushing, just to give you a bit more context in that space as well, to get DIA to actually jump in and revisit some of these things. These are concerns we've raised since we had a qualified audit opinion around the number of calls being received. So good to have audit pushing as well.
Hearing that, Sarah, that's good information. Right, are there any further? Councillor Gilmore?
We're talking about the service.
Yes.
We just flip back one page. That's okay. I was, and I think I've mentioned this the last time that came through, but this time I was even more horrified when I saw some of the results come through, and I think Mayor Tracy summed it up quite well by saying that there is a clear trend, and I'm probably going to hear in a moment that there's a trend across all councils in the country, I suspect. The thing is, though, is we don't have the power over other councils. We do have the power over our own. Some of the key metrics that are jumping in here, the trends for this year, vision and leadership, is something that we can directly influence as elected members. The first time, according to those reports, that's ever been under 60%. So not even at 40, faith and trust, but our overall reputation is really, really concerning. So my question is, I think as a team, we have a lot of work to do. And if we don't, then be that on our heads. But there's actually a whole lot of other things within this report. So my question is, and probably through you, Mayor Tracy, to Brian, who's popped up to the table, do we have any overarching plans to try and improve some of our our performance measures in this report.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, and thanks for the question, Councillor Scott. I mean, we should be concerned with this, so let's not deny that. But I will say, yes, every other council in the country. It is an fact, and the look that I've had is we're still favourable compared to most. If we go to the next slide, I want to just quickly talk about, if you look at our overall engagement and communication with the community, because this is a big thing, and this is where a lot of the vision and leadership come through. We're doing more engagement and communication than we've ever done since this in 2019. Public meetings, Facebook, social media has increased. We're going out meeting, you're going out meeting, it's all increased. But quite often, what are we telling them? You know, we're being transparent. And transparency, and I've had conversations numerous times with Mayor Tracy about this, can come back and bite you in the bum, because quite often you're telling them that possums are being found in your reservoir. And the reality is, I can guarantee you, since that's been built, it wouldn't be the first time a possum's been in there. So when we go out and talk about the impounded supply and things like that, it's going to be negative. People are going to hear more negativity about what's going on because we've been a lot more transparent. So I think transparency comes at a cost, but it's something we should and also stop doing. And I think that's a perfect example there, where people think we're communicating, engaging less, but we're doing a heck of a lot more. It's just that they're hearing a lot more things that aren't going so well. And I think that then flows on to a lot of the other aspects of it. In terms of what we can do to start improving this, I think, under, the whole sort of financial pressures people are under, people are generally in a worse state than maybe what they were previously when the economy and everything was good around that. But I think if we keep working, if we stay true to ourselves in terms of our communication, being transparent, but actually start ticking off some of these big ticket items, some of that confidence will come back in the community, and it won't happen overnight. But collectively, I think we're on the right track, because if you ask me what would we, do different, there wouldn't be a lot, to be honest.
Thanks for that, Brian. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Tracy, I endorse what Brian said. I mean, that's why I got involved in politics. We will make change, and we try, and we're being transparent. That meeting I went to on Monday night, people had issues, but the world's got issues. But also people come up and thanked us, as you well know, because this is the world we're living in, 2024.
Yep. Do you want to comment? And then I've got one.
Thank you, Brian. I think Brian captured it really well, but if I can add to what Brian talked about in terms of how we live this, I look at it from what I call a lead and lag measures. I think one of the areas where the team is also focusing on, in one of a better word, is our meetings. Sometimes you get a bad satisfaction rating because somebody tripped on a footpath or an issue that is really annoyed a ratepayer, and you see that come across. And I think if we also focus on making sure that, if we're looking at all the activities, the projects we're delivering on, so it's performance measures, and I think if there's focus on lifting that and achieving that, and I think that gives the public confidence, and I think you would see a change as well in some of these measures. So I think the team is tackling this in different ways. One is to make sure that our current performance measures. That's why there's a focus in our quarter report on our performance measures as well, and issues that we face. And I think if we try and lift those issues and deliver those well, they would have, I guess, overall bearing on community satisfaction. And the other thing that we're also looking at is, and I think it's looking at the questions that we're asking in the survey as well, to be more targeted questions, and so that we can get the response that we need as well to make sure that we're asking satisfaction, we're asking clearly about what is it that we want a satisfaction question remark on. So just making sure that because if we are going to be using this information to make decisions or to drive change direction, I think we've got to make sure that the survey questions are asking the right questions, and also about what we call the spread. That means making sure that the statistics stacks up, that we actually are canvassing a large enough or a good demographics so that informs this results, and then we can meaningfully create some action plans.
Thanks, Raj. Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, me, Tracy. I'm just in a way supporting Brian and Raj's comments, but none of us like to look at the greens and see them diminishing and the blues getting harder. But Councillor Steve did make the comment. I got appointed back on the council in 2018, I think it was, for that 1 year, 19. And then we had the disaster, we had the drought and no water. There's a real pattern here. We had the disaster with no water in Dannevirke, and then we had, without going on to it, we started turning the rocks over, as Chris Chapman would say, and started looking at issues with infrastructure, and that wasn't really well liked. We did have issues. We then had 2 years of the most significant rate increases Tararua's had. That was in 21 and 22, and we also had the dam, and then we've had we've had the roading issues. So you can sort of see the pattern from 2019, and it's really, really hard to change those. People just hated 2 years of rate increases, and we're going to have another one, isn't it? So, but the infrastructure, the water, the dam, and the roading has really put the people don't like us very much for that. And I think you can get pretty upset, but you've just got to think about the bigger picture. Hopefully we can turn those greens, push them around, but it's pretty confronting and won't be easy, and it'll take time. But if you go back to 19, this is what happened, and all the worst things happened to our community: affordability, rates, water, infrastructure, and they've all had that hit them in the face, and that is no doubt reflecting in this. But I take note, we did decide, we started to get a bit smarter with what we ask people too. So that's just my.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. And look, I'm quite happy if there's a team of councillors that want to have a bit of a think tank and work through some of this. I've put into the mayoral column and just having regular catch-ups out in the community where people can come and meet with us and just talk about what they want. But I also understand how much this hurts, because it hurts the team around this council table that work their guts out for the community, that are trying hard, for the team of staff here that also feel this and are working their guts out for the best of the district. So I think we've just got to be really clear in our messaging, lifting some of these rocks and opening these up and talking about the future is tough, but we know that we are doing the right thing. We've got to focus where our energy goes. And look, we have challenges. I think 2024, since COVID hit, there has been a real societal change. People want that transparency. There is a general distrust. It is worldwide when I did travel overseas. But I know for myself and my heart, we come here to do better for our district every single day. And I know that of the staff and the team at this council. So I'm committed on turning these around, but I do know and acknowledge how much it hurts when we do see this. And I think you've all made really valuable comments on that. So all we can say is, I guess, and with the 1st Battalion in mind, onward. So we will break. I'll have one final question from Councillor Wards, and then we'll break for morning tea.
It's through you, me, Trace, it's regarding this fabulous data, and if that becomes part of our quarterly discussions around, how we're going, and I endorse what Councillor Carey's saying. You've got to be able to step back and look at, the trends and what happened during those periods of years. So I commend the thinking and the systemizing of looking at our data, because up until we got something like this, it was the old ad hoc comments that we might find on a survey form that was influencing some of our direction taking. So thrilled to see this. Does this get shared widely with the staff, Brian, or?
This is on a platform we call our Taurua Intelligence Portal. So all staff have access to this. At our staff meeting, I want to say, was it before Christmas? It must have been because Ollie was at home. Before Christmas, Dan did a walkthrough and showed the team all of this information that's in there. What I haven't gotten here is, while we were just chatting, I pulled up emergency development, and the comments have been included as well, but they aren't yes, they're not redacted. This was the best way to describe it. But some of the comments on civil defence were, when is my bridge going to be open? And that was a 1-point rating. So I've not seen anything about council being prepared for an emergency event, or emergency services are slow to respond. So it's, and I think we've talked about civil defence before. Pete definitely has his work cut out in that space. So yeah. But no, it's available. We did try to make it available for the elected members, but it's on our internal network, and I ran into IT issues, so I apologise.
Thanks, Sarah. If these could get even shared to the hub, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, it is good data. So thank you. Right, if we break and come back at 10:35, councillors, I think just a beer and a coffee would be great. Right, welcome back. We'll move on to the capital expenditure report, so pages 21 to 27. Sarah, or Mike, sorry.
Thank you, councillors. So capital expenditure report, I'll take that part as read. I do want to highlight a few parts though. So as you can see, right off the bat, we've spent just over $10 million out of a total of $48 million. That is as of January. I'd just like to take a second there as well to just show how it's also been compiled. So we got just under $27 million was actually an annual plan. So that was a bunch of the reworks that we'd done, and we did a fair amount of work in that space. Well, the carry forwards have been totaled and added into that at just over 14. And additionally, we've also got the $7 million in total at the moment for the impounded supply for this current financial year. So that raises the total up. What I'd like to also have a look at is the next chart, which is 195 projects across the line. What I'd like to show immediately is that we have majority moved into delivery at this stage, and a lot of them are in planning. And again, it is in relation to our project management plans and frameworks being followed. So we're starting along that process with a lot of them. So it's been a work in progress, but you can see that they are actually moving along that pathway. We can see the as required projects year to date budgets. That is again primarily our renewals, and we can see how much we've consumed of that budget as we move into it. The capital program by status pie chart again just shows exactly where we've got with our planning to delivery sort of model, as well as that bottom section there as well sort of is more relevant to the procurement phase for those projects. At this stage, do we have any questions? We have to carry on. Cool. I've detailed a bit more, and from 8.5 downwards as to just which projects that are of interest or noted projects in delivery, as well as planning, procurement, which ones have closed, and some that are also in initiation. I've made note that there's one on hold within the planning phase, being the external wastewater program at this current stage. We'll be having some more on the detail on those projects as well coming up in the infrastructure committee meeting following this one. 8.9 shows our budget versus actual breakdown for this year, so we can see that where our major sort of underspent areas are at this current stage within the financial year, and that being transport, wastewater and water supplies.
Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Tracy. You're on a bit of a roll, so I wasn't sure how. But you've got to the section where, so if we look at that graph at 8.9, Mike, which I really appreciate being able to see this demonstrated. So I've put great big arrows because we've got 6 months to go. We've got great big arrows between the blue and the orange going. So that's our catch up, isn't it? We've got a lot to do in the next 6 months before we see what might look like the year-to-date report covering that year. So, and given what Debbie Pereira talked about yesterday with the carryovers, I'm very nervous, I guess, because further down you've acknowledged that in 8.9.2 we've got large unspent sections, all in the right areas. Except I guess I was thinking why we got so much of a difference in the community building space. So I guess I'm seeking some reassurance. We've spent about a quarter of what overall we might have wanted to have spent. So there's a lot of work going to happen in the next 6 months based on what you're demonstrating here. So, and I always want to try and get to a question. So what is the plan? You've mentioned words prioritisation. Do we need to redirect? Is it, because most of it is renewal, as you've indicated, it's not something we could stop and defer for another based on what you're saying here. So what is the plan, and what will be the how to ensure that the concerted effort to prioritise value for money, what's that going to look like for us as governors? So you question that, the question really comes out of 8.9.9. Despite all of this, there is a concerted effort. What's that look like to us in the next 6 months?
I felt like there was a lot of questions in there. It's okay. Sorry, through you, Mayor Tracy. So we've got in there that part about the communities and rec facilities. I did have an 8.9.6 about where some of that underspent portion is, and that isn't currently with the executing TDC PARS. So we had a lot of money put into that one as well. And we've also got upgrading council and reserves, so that both those being better off funded projects. You've also got under pool walkway as part of a pool contribution. Won't carry on there. That part there, but though how it looks, I suppose, is if we do consider that we've got Route 52 in there, Paetua wastewater treatment plant upgrades, Ekatahuna wastewater treatment plant upgrades. The financial spend for these sort of projects, I suppose, comes down to the financial part of it is one metric that we could use to measure, I guess, the project. Whether or not it delivers is another question in its entirety. So we want to make sure we get that right. So then we end up with the planning of those projects, and that should theoretically, from the framework's point of view, be portrayed within the designated committee reports. So that we go through those sort of projects and we show you where we're going with those and what the thinkings and considerations are for those spends.
So just further to that, Mayor Tracy, so the word for me comes down to priorities. So 6 months in, we've still got the right priorities, Mike, in terms of what we're looking at in all of that work.
Yes, I believe so.
Johns.
I'm not quite sure whether this was the right forum to discuss what's happening in various issues, e.g. Lindau Walkway and Carnegie Hall and or Northwood Water Treatment Upgrade. Do we want to get into that detail here, or are we just talking about the financial aspects and where they fit?
So Northwood water treatment will come up this afternoon in infrastructure, but mainly in the financial side. But are you concerned around the funding for the Lindau Walkway in the same respect that you were concerned at the Transport Choices funding? Okay. Probably Hamish can update that one in this afternoon. Yeah. Thank you. And I did have some questions in my agenda for that one as well. Thanks. Okay.
So one more part, I suppose, is that, the project management framework was adopted the other year. We've had a cyclone that's definitely put a bit of a damper on some of the works in the construction area, and let's say the Transport Choices one, and as well as just the transport sector in general has also had that. But while that has actually come into place and we are starting to see this sort of move through and be put through the organisation, and I think that's relevant if you check out the graph that was for the capital program by status, so we can see that we actually are moving all these things through. I remember when I first started, we started reporting on some of these. We had, not started, initiating and the like. So we have progressed a lot of these things and we've got a bit more of a handle on that. While that is the case, people are getting used to that sort of part. So then we have to continue hammering away at this, I suppose, financial prudence and making sure that we actually are forecasting and budgeting all these sort of things, as well as not charging down to spend something that we don't want to actually put in place or have the correct contractual obligations to actually ensure in the future.
Peter Weber.
Am I able to ask about the PARS? Is it all right? I was just reading about the PARS strategy and the 1.8 million that we've got there, and then it's been put towards the council-owned reserves, Lindau Walkway, Paetua Pool contribution, totaling 1.8 million, and then you've got the Better Off funding program, and it's got actioning the PARS. In the PARS we ranked the projects on, with what order they should be done in, and some of these projects that we've got, Lindau Walkway and Paetua Pool, not saying that they shouldn't have funding, but they weren't necessarily at the top of the list. So who the money should be going into that area?
Sorry, that's just through you, Mayor Tracy. I suppose it's just been read in that way, and I'm sorry that it wasn't as clear. So the executing TDC PARs and actioning PARs, the names were at that current stage where they were put forward were somewhat interchangeable. So we've had to settle on actioning the PAR strategy. Those ones there of upgrading council owned reserves, Linda Walkway, they're all individuals, and that's just the total of that one for this financial year. Actioning. Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, no, I see how it was read that way. It should be 1.5 in total for the actioning PAR strategy over the lifetime of the project. And just to put forward one other piece here is that we do have a program manager that's been hired for the Better Off Funding projects. She's been working through a lot of this in the last few weeks. And then those sort of things will be coming through to the next Community Development Wellbeing Committee. So they'll be coming in the form of project sheets as well for each one of those projects.
For that clarification. Okay, if there are no further questions, can I have somebody move that the recommendation on page 7 that we receive that? Councillor Sutherland, seconded Councillor Long. All those in favour, please say aye. Carry. Sorry, the Treasury report of that, sorry, pages 27 and 31. In the agenda, when I do that, I'll just have to put the recommendations. No, that's my note.
Hey, Tracy. Ali, could you please bring up the dashboard, the Treasury dashboard that was on page 9, please?
Second page of your attachment. Page 2.
So looking at the Treasury performance, finance costs have increased compared to what we had expected, but that's due to the current markets with interest rates rising. The feeling out there at the moment is that OCR rate is probably going to increase because the markets have been quite hawkish. So what that means is that they're just trying to keep inflation down by raising the interest rate costs. However, we are constantly working with our external Treasury advisors, PwC, in order to hedge any risks against interest rate increases, which we managed to do back in December. The rates fell below 4%, so we took advantage of that and we were able to transact a couple of swap transactions. And we'll be working with PwC to look at any other future swaps that we can put in place to mitigate any rising interest rates. If we look at the external debt, we are on track for the first 6 months of the year. So our actuals are 59.2 borrow external debt, and we'd plan to borrow roughly around that amount as well. If I could just cast your eyes over the total external debt line in this rectangle box above the graphs, there is a slight error there where the year-to-date budget reads as 65,962. That has been corrected. That is our end-of-year planned budget. But however, the Treasury position, year-to-date borrowings is what we had planned to be at 31 December. Nothing else really to report in the Treasury space. We looked at, we had the ability to pre-fund some debt for our April 24 maturities. So we did pre-funding for that back in September, $4 million, and we've put those on term deposit. And when the debt matures in April, that will cover that off. Sarah is going to talk to the room about the debt level headroom, so I won't cover off that. But what I have been asked to briefly discuss is that it's been brought to our attention that there is slight concern within the community again around the LGFA covenants and the risk of homeowners potentially losing their home if council defaults on loan repayment to the LGFA. So I just want to reiterate, we covered this off back in the Finance Performance Committee meeting back in August 24 on the 23rd. So we have the LGFA have got covenants that council needs to follow. No councils in history have defaulted on a loan repayment. So when we take out borrowing, it's just like borrowing a home mortgage. You have security over your house. With us, with the LGFA, our security is over our rating database. We are a guarantor. We borrow from the LGFA because we get more attractive interest rates. For it to get to the point that, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I haven't articulated it very well, what I'm trying to say is that there are many steps along the way to ensure that this doesn't happen for the homeowner. So I just want to give reassurance that although there is the talk within the community that you can have peace of mind that this is all covered off in the legislation and through the work that is done with other third parties to ensure that we don't default on loan repayments to the LGFA.
Let's make an additional comment on that.
Thank you, Beth. I think you've explained it really well. So thank you. And I just add to Beth in a sense that the LGFA covenants and the debenture that we have, they got security over our rates, revenue, not to the property, because that's property rights. So that's where they're secure, because council has the ability through the Rating Act to rate, and that's why we do that, and they have security against our rates. And so that's I think that's the distinction. And I think on reflection, when Mayor Tracy raised that with me, and I thought, okay, where is this coming from? And I think council through its Rating Act has the ability, if ratepayers default on rates, using the rating sales and the abandoned land process. So we have an ability in the Rating Act to do that if they're owing rates. That's us. That's our, I guess, ability, authority in the Rating Act. It doesn't extend to our banks or LGFAs. It doesn't. It's councils, and they have no ability apart from securing or have security over our revenue from rates. They have no ability to do what council does under the Rating Act.
Following on from our discussion earlier in the week on this, me, Tracy, came up with a really great idea, and I haven't done it yet for the quick facts, but I'm going to just present it to you today. Council has 10,725 accessible rating units at 30 June 2023. If we take our debt level at 31 December, per accessible rateable unit is $5,519. Council's asset database at 30 June 2023 was over $1 billion. This equates to $109,954 of assets per rateable unit. So just really wanted to stress that we have assets.
And look, I did ask just with it that little bit of noise and a little bit of concern, and it doesn't take much at the moment in the community for those things to roll. So I just wanted to be very clear, and that so that everybody understood that. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. And Beth, thanks for running through the Treasury performance. Acknowledge I'm a bit of a nerd, so I very much enjoy running through that report. I did want to, I guess, commend the team for the work that they've been doing there, hedging against what could have been a much greater variance. And, you know, that variance can have a huge direct rating impact, even looking at that 1.2, 1.3% of rates for that variance, but that could have been a huge amount worse if we hadn't have hedged the way that we did. So just wanted to acknowledge that and thank the group of people that work on it for us.
Okay. Sarah, did you want to make a comment? And then I've got council awards.
Sorry, I was just going to add back into that. In this dashboard, we only present on the finance costs. There's finance revenue, which was tracking 604,000 more than budgeted in our annual plan. So the net treasury activity is shown favourably.
I'm the other nerd in the room around these aspects. So thank you, Beth and Sarah. 9.6.3, you've stated there the headroom, which I really appreciate knowing. Are we trending up or are we trending down? Or I tried looking for comparisons across the last few quarters as to are we going up? Are we staying steady?
Through your worship, we are probably tracking no real change. Your change is going to come. I can foresee the future. Your change is going to come in the third quarter report because I know we have taken out borrowings around the impounded supply. So your actuals will move then.
That's my second question, so thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Just before you move on with Treasury, it was a bit more high level for me. So given looking at some of the aspects of the afternoon's report, just looking at infrastructure risks and the possibility of the amounts of money we may have to spend just going ahead. We've talked about crystal balling debt going forward. So have Raj or the team, I think we probably need to really start thinking about how do we get our hands on another $50 or $60 million or more going forward. Are we talking to the regional council, our other people? Does our members of MW-LAS? Palmerston North City has got some scary things out future. I just have on a regional basis, Raj or Brian, have we been worrying about debt amongst ourselves on a regional basis as a council controlled organisation? The government have sort of kind of thrown this boat back into our stream a little bit with some talk about financing and help, but I wonder if we just shouldn't at some stage try and get ahead of the game here and get lined up with other councils. I mean, it does worry me greatly looking ahead of where we might need to be with finance, and we might have to be think a bit smarter with debt funding, with special purpose borrowing units. At some stage the government will touch on this, but it's probably not going to be for at least 6 to 8 months, 9 months. So I mean, we're not the only council, and I think we'll be forced into perhaps not forced, be pushed into the Horizons region amongst other councils. Just this aspect of debt, looking out ahead, the next really, should we give some serious thought to what we might do if we have to find another 30 or 40 million debt in a hurry to fix infrastructure? And I don't think we can keep doing what we're doing right now without some changes.
That's really good, and Brian will touch on his perspective on a regional approach with Chief Executive, but I could touch on the questions you asked about our approach, and I think Sarah touched that when she did the financial strategy as to how are we going to address this issue about debt and funding of of infrastructure investments. So funding and infrastructure investments has got three buckets. We have the growth-related projects, the level of service project that's debt funded, and then you have renewals. So all three have got a different set of challenge because renewals is funded from depreciation reserves. That's the challenge that the team is going through in terms of doing the modeling to make sure that we've seen a significant increase in renewal expenditure, especially in the tree water space. We've got to make sure that we model that level of service, debt modeling, and in the financial strategy. And I think what we're looking at is opportunities for different funding vehicles or funding options. So we'd explore that for the growth-related projects. And I think we're going to put the DC in place in year one of the LTP. So that, in a sense, will provide a different revenue stream. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Carey. We need to think about how we not only manage our investments, but also look at how we fund that. And I think given it's a long-term plan, it's good for us to think about that long-term picture, especially in the area of depreciation funding, because we are funding long-term assets. And if we have confidence, this is where I think we've got to stress, if we have confidence in our renewal profile and projection, then we can make informed decisions about how we fund those long-term infrastructure assets. So those are the critical things I think will be addressed through the financial strategy.
Sorry, can I just tap on to the end of that? It wouldn't be prudent for us to just draw down 50 million off the bat. We like to have a plan. Our treasury experts love us to have a plan. Beth and I'm not sure if you've picked up, love a plan. But just on the other sort of sources of funding that we can get, I guess Debbie touched on it yesterday around she was missing a opinion review committee meeting yesterday around external funding. So just knowing what our peers are facing within their long-term plans and what strategies they've put in place, I know, and Debbie alluded to it, one of her clients is using the infrastructure fund, which is going under a hot review. So Raj and I and Beth are probably a little bit more prudent in that we will watch and wait and see what the outcome of that is, because it may affect the opinion that is issued over their plan.
Through you, Tracy, cover off a couple of points with that, because I mean, the reality is you're right. We've got to start looking at how we can fund things differently. And certainly the legislation that will be introduced through the government's, is it better? Well, will, in my view, will create some debt separation in terms of those assets to a CCO, but then how much liability still remains with the overarching councils will be interesting to see how that is legislated to create that. But it is I think the actual issue is the whole funding model for local government, where I think we get to spend about 8% of the total tax take, but out of the infrastructure costs for the country, we're required to spend 40%. The government spends 40% and then private spends 20%. So out of that 8%, we've got to spend 40%, and it just doesn't fit. So the funding model in essence is just broken, and I think every council's really struggling with this at the moment, and there hasn't really been any commitment from the government to change that yet either, because their books aren't looking that great. And they did talk about the city and regional deals, potentially looking at how they could have sort of supported investment through growth. But there hasn't been a lot of commentary that I've heard around that, Mayor Tracy, and whether or not you've heard anything about that as well. So it is going to be a challenge, whether or not, though, that the new CCO models, and as a regional CEs, the work has started around that. So we have got a model being created. Hawke's Bay's already got a model that I think a lot will copy of as well, but whether or not gives us all enough debt headroom, I think we've got to wait and see about that. But it is a good question that probably needs to be raised at a political level.
Question, Councillor Sullivan put me in a difficult position, and I'll brief you later, but those those conversations are happening at different regions, but there is a lot of work to be done. But we've now got that opportunity because we're not the only council facing this. And I talked about those gold star standards. You would have seen Mayor Grant Smith's State of the City report, talking around that. So there are a lot of things happening at the moment, but no detail to bring back to this table as yet. But we are certainly taking part in them. Councillor Wards.
Very quickly for me, Tracy, through you to Raj. Those 3 strategy buckets you talked about just before, Raj, about depreciation, where would the impound supply, because it's a bit of both, isn't it? It's a bit of, so the strategy and funding of that, are we able to take from 2 of those, or I guess that'll come through in the detail, but so it's an interesting way of setting the scene of how we, for renewals, it's all out of that, but
So you're right. I'm going to explain it this way. We like to keep things complicated. So the categories that we have is what's required by Local Government Act. The Act says that you now need to disclose or reflect your projects in those 3 buckets. And where a project straddles across 2, you pick the majority. So we, in a sense, would say that Dannevirke Impounders up at the dam could be a level of service debt funded, but sitting underneath that would be maybe 60% funded from debt because it's new. The remainder 40% could be funded for renewal because we are replacing a current asset. So the classification doesn't determine directly the funding. The funding then we can do that. Or some elements could be growth. We could realize at a point. Correct. So that's why, as part of the process, I think is that we're going to identify quite clearly where growth elements are, because it's an ability for us now to factor that into the DEC as collecting it. So that's a process we go through. Yeah.
They uncomplicated it for me. Thank you.
There is a simple.
With your mic on.
Chinese are always looking for investments. We need to get rid of some liabilities. Why don't we sell Akatea to the Chinese?
Given the option.
Massive tourist resort, it fits all the infrastructure. At no cost to us.
I am, and Councillor Johns does like to wind other councillors up. Right, Sarah. Welcome, Ali. The debtors report's actually one of high interest, so yeah.
Morning, Mayor Tracy, councillors. So I take it that the debtors report has been read. So yeah, we started the rating year with 2,043 rating units with arrears of $2,333,923 owing. And of these, we've had 1,646 rating units with 848,000 being paid, leaving 397 units remaining, the balance of 1,485,708. So I'll take you to table 1.3. That shows sort of how we're managing the debt with the going from the 1st of July through to how we categorise the rating units. And then over to we were at the 31st of December with those arrears, and then where they lead into with the current, because while they're paying their arrears, the money's going there and penalty before it goes to the current. So we're always going to have that build up until they finish their agreement or we put the pressure on them that, yeah, they get the debt sorted. So, yeah, thankfully, yeah, it is coming down. So we put the 134 rating units to DMC, and we've had 23 of those cleared by the 31st of December. So I'm not sure whether that was through the mortgage being paid, the demand on the mortgage being paid, or whether they just, once we send out the formal demand notification that we're going to do that, some of them just get it paid without having to go to the bank to get that money. Yeah, so we will keep working on these. Yeah, to get that down. You'll note that there are now 101,251 that have started not meeting instalment 1 and 2. Yeah, from 1st of July. So they had cleared 1st of July, but now that, yeah, so yeah. So is there any questions about that table?
Thanks, Eleanor. It's certainly telling a story. Councillor Long.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, that 2,000 in arrears. Lost it.
Page 31, bottom list.
Oh, 2,043, thank you, in arrears. How does that reflect in previous years? It's an enormous percentage of our ratepayers.
So, yeah.
Page 31.
Yeah, if you go to page 32. 34, there is one there with how we track with the debt at the 1st of July. Sorry. Cross these. Page 34, table 1.5. So the first half shows the arrears. So what we had at the 1st of July. And I've put a table up there with the number of rating units that we had at those years with the amount of rates less the remissions that we collect, that we set the rates on. Yeah. So that was our balance there. So it has increased, yeah, over the years. And then to the right there, at the 30th of June is the total arrears that we've collected and what the balance was at 1st of July. Yeah. And then coming down in the blue and the green is these 30th of June balances of where we were at. Yeah. I think there's an error there with the 1980. It should be 2043. There's 63 rating units with $8 difference. I'm not sure. Sorry, what happened there, but yeah, it's it should be 2043. And then I've got the balance of where we are at the 31st of July, 31st of December. Sorry.
So Ellie, it's increasing year on year. Yeah. So I think we need to reflect on that when we're, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Wards, Councillor Gilmore and Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Table 1.4, I like your pictures, Ellie. So the arrears balance profile, the interesting thing for me, and it's what I just wanted to inquire about, is even though the rates overdue have come down, it looks like there's just been a tiny increase in the cost of the legal proceedings to get that. Is that about getting the arrears sorted, or is it legal proceedings? Is that where a debt management fees come in, or no? No,
they don't come in. They're sort of paid separately. No, it's just we have put more to the legal proceedings. You know, that there's been that shift from up the top to coming down. I've got 5 ready to go for abandoned land that will be advertised soon to be sold. So that will, yeah, but it is accumulating each year on year with penalty and things. So yeah, it's just yeah, that is the risk that we're not going to get the money.
Try and get the money back, isn't it?
Yeah, we're not going to get the money back that's sitting on there. We're going to have to write some of that off. And yeah, yeah. And the Maryland does I've got to speak Brian about that, but that's probably going to get written off because there's 6 properties there that are not being used and they come under the Maryland, but we just haven't got there yet, sorry. But,
Good
yeah.
picture though.
Councillor Gilmore.
For your report. It's just having a look at just the table we mentioned on page 34 that kind of has the so the total arrears from 2019 to 2023. And sort of noting as has been discussed of a large jump, even though there's more rating units. I haven't gone through and worked out the percentages, but the percentages from last year from 22 to 23 will be a really large percentage. So I suppose you're having to manage this and to deal with this. What's happening in some of those conversations with our ratepayers? Are you noticing any trends that are coming through on perhaps why that number's jumped as much? I know that there's been some chatter in some small groups about protesting and not paying rates and other pieces. Are you starting to see any trends coming through with such a significant jump?
Some of those ones we just don't hear of. Some of them we do, and we've written back to them and said like what the legislation is that they do need to pay rates. But yeah, a lot of it is just, I guess, they're just not being able to afford it, or something else comes up that they've got to prioritise. And that it's, yeah, we try and get them on direct debit, which you'll see on yeah, but the more they can get on there, the more it's easier to pay it bit by bit than in the large sums. And a lot of them do, they will go on there. Some of them do that for an agreement, and then they don't do that anymore and get off it, and then they get in trouble again and come back. So it's a lot of them that we talk to are really genuine and they're just struggling out there. It is hard. Yeah, it is. Yeah, we try and see if they meet the rate rebate deadline, criteria, and get them on that if they haven't heard about it. If they, some are too proud to take that up, they don't want to. Yeah, yeah.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, I think you alluded to it. My question is about this mixed ownership. Since I've been in council, there's one property in Dannevirke I'll allude to, refer to, I should say, but nothing's moved, and it's a hazard and everything else. But every time I ask the question, that can't be got rid of because of the way it's structured.
It's not Maryland.
It's not, yeah. Oh, because when I made, none of them were. Okay, so those, are they one of the 5 that are in your legal
settings?
Oh, cool. So the question there is then, what's the time frame on that, please?
It's at DMC, so yeah, we'll just be working with them because it's the going through the court process that I can't give a time frame on the court structure of when, yeah, we can get it into the court system and
That's in court.
Well, it's in the process, but yeah.
Thanks. Eleanor, I had one, the ratepayers by town. Is there any chance that you could align that with our water and our wastewater systems? So could we get Norsewood included in there? And I guess I'm just looking because it also helps with rateable units and number of connections and just linking all of those projects as well. If that's not too difficult, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I do that actually each year because that water team and that when they're doing deliveries, they need to know for the towns how many. So I do that breakdown of, yeah, so I can include that in there. Right, yeah.
Thanks, I'd really appreciate that. And just looking at and seeing the increase, and we understand that, you know, times are tough out there. The interest side that is written off, you know, there is a cost that when it's written off, that's borne by general rates.
Mayor Tracy, is the penalties that we apply? So it's just not the interest. Yeah. So the penalties, we don't, in a sense, we are quite very conservative in how we budget for penalties revenue because we do know we write it off. So there's no burden on the wider ratepayers if we write off penalties. If we don't write off rates, we cannot write off rates. It has to come through a council resolution. And I don't think, Ellie, that we have ever written off rates because we use the current tools to actually go into payment plan and encourage payment. Penalties, yes, we do write off, but it's no impact on the wider ratepayers.
Sorry, we have written off rates, Rose, where if they're sold by abandoned land and they don't meet, you know, all the money, we look at the rates first and put the money to the rates and then remit the penalty and any surplus rates that there are. But we do have to share that money with Horizons Regional Council because they have the ratepayer not paying their rates as well. So there's a percentage that we divvy up and goes.
So part of the legal breach.
Thanks for that clarification, Ellie. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Table 1.6, Eleanor, the rate rebates process to date. I mean, I know the figures above it are for a full year. So we're up to almost 200 rebates requested and processed so far. Do you foresee the next 6 months following the same trend as previous years? It goes in line with what Mayor Tracy is asking, I guess, about where the affordability issues might land. Do you expect that to be significantly higher than previous years, or do you think they're tracking about the same?
Yes, we have done quite a few since this. So that'll come into the next one. And yeah, there will be. Yeah, we will make sure that all of those that we sort of send out a couple of letters a year. If they haven't done them when we send them out, we try and contact them again so that they do. Yeah, so they are increasing, and I'm sure that we will get
to at least last year.
Right. No further questions. Thank you very much, Ellie. We know that you put an enormous amount of work into that, and it is an incredibly complex area. Sarah, probably maybe next time, actually, those are some graphs that would be high interest to bring up on the screen at the same time. So we'll do that too. Thank you. Right. That's awesome. We will move into forestry. Johns will be on fire. We're just going to take that report as read, Sarah, and Raj can make any comments. So can I have somebody move the recommendation that we receive the report? Councillor Wards, Councillor Wallace, all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, does anyone have any questions on that? I'm looking to you, Councillor Johns.
Yes, 11.1.
Can you just pop the microphone?
11.1.5, the reserve, forestry reserve, $714,000 odd dollars. Does that include the carbon credits?
Through your worship, the reserve balance that is sitting there is funds that have physically been received, less funds that have physically been paid. So no to the carbon credits, they're an asset on our books and another mechanism.
Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. 11.1.3, Sarah. What would we spend $8,000 in management fees on for two?
Forest 360, wasn't it?
For 6 months?
Oh,
So the little bit of confusion is, so forestry, we're covering pages 83 and 84. While I was quickly looking for the points that people were covering, and Raj and I both just worked it out.
Councillors are looking at the self-funding section of the 6-month report. We can cover off both the forestry section in the self-funding report, also the forestry separate report, which is
Just give the page number you're working from and I'll flick to it.
Sorry, so I'm looking at page 36.
No, sorry, I was on page 83.
Where are you?
The question was on the management fee that has come out.
Yes, that's from forestry 60.
Okay. There's nothing further, just the council's engaged Forest New Zealand sales to put a marketing proposal forward. Has that been received? That's progressing well. When are we expecting that, do you think?
Your worship, just received the proposal. We have to look at that. So once we look at the proposal, then we'll all agree on the proposal. And the timelines it's what we have initially had the conversation with Forest. We like to act on this pretty quickly.
I think further, I've made up a little bit of time, so that's a good thing. The forestry. Right, if we move into the deep dives. We are deep dives, we're going to page 90, solid waste. For the forestry. Sorry, I thought I had done that. I have. Yes, no, that's all right. I got one early, one on time, and reminder. Okay, so if we just move on to that deep dive.
Page.
91. Oh, 19.
19. Yeah. It says part of the management report, so we've already done that. But for that, so Sarah, did you want to run through this? And these deep dives, the way that we've selected them is around some of the largest costs. So last time just around water and waste, but actually, and I guess with the waste minimisation plan coming up this afternoon, understanding the costs that's in rubbish and recycling. It's a huge cost over the district as in opening hours. So I thought this would be a good one to understand. And I'd highly recommend councillors that you take this back to your community committees and organisations and share that data as well. Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will take it as read, and we're all extremely excited to talk about solid waste. I just wanted to probably highlight a couple of key things. You'll notice within each of my tables for each of the transfer stations, there's this thing called street bin cleaning, and I've got it in italics. So the street bin cleaning is around the Raj and I had this discussion not that long ago, actually. It's the bins that are along your main streets or within your parks, and they fall into the solid waste activity. As part of the long-term plan, we're looking to move them to their respective activities. So the reason they've not previously been under the footpath activity, for instance, is because it kind of comes into the Waka Kotahi sort of realm of where they do not fund any of this. This is ratepayer funded. So we're just working out how we can look to do that. So I've left it in italics just so that you're aware what that is and just giving you a bit more information. As mentioned, we have taken over the running of the transfer stations. I think it was from 1 November, correct me if I'm wrong, Raj, which kind of distorts these figures a little bit, which is why I've tried to give you, which is why I've included the actuals, I guess, to December 2022. Some of the key things that I'm seeing through the reports and through the numbers, which I'm working with Joe on in the long-term plan budgets, is that our revenue, although it's less than what we had budgeted, our tonnage has come down significantly. Well, yeah, significantly. If I look at Paetua just off the bat, for the same period, 1 July to 31 December last year, we had 921 tonnes of refuse come out of that site. For the same period to the 23 financial year, we've got 586 tonne. You can see within the revenue, we've got more revenue than what we did for the same period last year. So Joe is doing a marvellous job in this space. With taking back the running, it's enabling her to do a lot more things. Rather than listen to me talk about it, I guess it might be better if I take questions and see what your interest is, see what I can feed back. Just note that we, as part of the long-term plan, are working to ensure that this is pretty slim and straightforward moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And I think good to understand that waste minimisation fund and levy before we go into this afternoon's meeting. I've got a couple, but I'll go to Councillor Wards and Councillor Gilmore first.
Thanks, me, Tracy. Just, I really, the detail here is fantastic. Thank you, Sarah, and please, commend the team for being able to provide it. If we could just have a look at, I'm just trying to see what the table number might be. It's on page 92. Although I've circled on my picture Akatea, I'm also looking at some of the smaller communities where I wouldn't mind some clarification on what the definitions are, because there is no refuse service at Akatio, and I know the bulk recycling bins. I'm just querying the previous year's actuals for curbside refuse in Akatio. Did that relate to those bins that we put out there at Christmas time? Because I thought that was a joint venture with the Ratepayers Association, because my concern is we've got a current year actuals at 4,800, but we've not actually budgeting anything. So
Possibly been that high.
and similarly in some of the, I was looking at Herbert Pool.
Councillor, I cut you off.
You have an actual, obviously not planning to do anything out there. So I guess I'm querying where the definitions sit for some of our smaller. Yeah.
Your worship, with regards to Akatea specifically, I'll need to do research and come back to you with an answer on that. But just looking at it, I think it's a lot of it is that's an old historic code that we've used and we've just recycled it, and it actually
Different meaning.
it's a better meaning, and I should have, my apologies, when I should have given you a better explanation into that, but I can do that when I come back with the Akatea information.
Thanks, Councillor Wards. I looked at that and thought that's an awful lot from bins.
Apologise.
Thank you. Councillor Gilmore, then Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Thanks very much for your work on this as well, Sarah, really. And apologies if you did mention it, I was trying to flick through my pages, but I was looking at the carbon credits line in particular on them. So noting that, and I think I know what may have happened, or what may be the reason for it, but Dannyvirk seems way over budget, Paetua a little bit, but then we have budget allocated at some of our other transfer stations and no expenditure. Are they getting grouped in to Dannyvirk and to Paetua?
Through your worship, great question. It will be a phasing issue within our budgeting system, so.
Councillor Johns. Can I just clarify, Sarah, when you said you're going to be looking at these bins so they're in the right places, so am I correct in thinking, so if there's a bin at the cemetery, that will then go into it being a cemetery costs? Or, it's quite a difficult thing to put where they're lying, and I'm thinking, Herbertville's got one by the beach. It's not really a park or a reserve, but it's a service. So I guess I'm just trying to get my head around that, or whether are we overcomplicating it?
No, I take on board your feedback, and I hadn't actually considered the cemeteries off the top of my head. So that might be why we're sitting under the solid waste activity. And if I just communicate and give a better explanation as to what that actually is. The only issue that we kind of is it falls into Jo's budget areas, and it's making sure that she's aware and having the conversations to making sure that the relevant managers have oversight of the approval of those costs. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, and just leading on from that, Chair. It's like retailers in High Street uses public bins to put all their cardboard in. That absolutely does me in. I know that's not the, and then they have the cheek to ask for more bins. So, I don't know how we can police that.
Some proposed rates at the recycling centre for cardboard as well. You're talking about the wheelie bins?
No, I'm talking about the retailer that cuts up his cardboard and sticks it in the front of his shop bin that's there for paper. Retailers.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. And look, I think for me, look, rubbish and waste, and that's why I wanted to talk about the waste minimisation. That's our one big opportunity as a district to save money. The more that we are recycling or composting, the less charges that we have, and to understand those carbon credits, but also to understand what our liabilities are, even on closed landfills. It doesn't go away. So I think they are, it's an area of focus for me, and one that I can't see coming down. I guess the one for me just around the waste minimisation fund is, I always like to see something for our residents, and I note that we did, we had a balance left there, and part of that old waste minimisation fund there was an opportunity to have an e-day or a recycling day that they could get rid of that waste, especially when we look at some of the new charges coming in around degassing refrigerators and bits like that. So yeah, I'd love to give something back and have something for people.
Just on e-waste, Jo has factored into her year one an e-waste day.
Hey. Thank you. No, that's really, it is really good, and I do appreciate that work that we all learn a lot when we do those deep dives. Okay. And that's as part of the management report. So if we move into the next hot topic, we will, but it's been covered it's in the management report, the deep dive. Yeah, so if we move to the Treasury headroom, page 9.
Yeah, insurance, sorry, Tracy.
Yep, yeah, absolutely, sorry. Cost of insurance. Yes. Well, I think the note I've got written here for me was when you see that 1% of rates is $338,000. Councillor Woods, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Tracy. I had to use my calculator a couple of times on this table. And it's no reflection on the team and the effort that goes in here, but it just blows me away that from 2020 to 2024, the costs of insurance for material damage and infrastructure has effectively doubled. And then in the past year, there's been a 26% increase. I mean, how can you put a strategy in with that going on in terms of, I'm looking forward to this workshop that we're having because it's just getting out of hand, isn't it? You guys must just roll your eyes every time you, all those two, every time you get an insurance bill that, you know. Yeah.
I'm glad, Councillor Watts, you talked about how do we wrap a strategy around a cost that we have inability to control, but where we can influence and this is where it'll be good to do the strategy. I'm looking forward to it as well, because insurance is a risk management tool. It is a risk that infrastructure would be damaged. We just want to make sure that we have an insurance policy that covers it. There are some tools I think we can work out, like in the building space, we could look to do what you call optimization. There means a town hall. Maybe now we're paying for town hall. The value is 5 million. That's the insurance that we have. Will we replace like for like? So that are the conscious decisions we can make, say that, no, we're not going to insure that for 5 million, or we insure it for less. So those are the discussions we have to make, call optimization. Some buildings we may choose not to insure because we say if they're building, whatever reasons, we just insure for demolition. No, we don't replace. So those are the decisions I think we like to make. The other thing we call what we call loss modeling. And this is the thing we want to work through with Aon in a sense. So looking at underground infrastructure, we are quite dispersed schemes that we have. If any earthquake hits us, it's not going to impact all the towns at one go. So, but risk too. So we got to think about now what's the modeling. So we have $250 million of infrastructure underground. Do we insure 250 million or do we insure 150 as a loss modeling? What's the risk? So we need to think about that. So this workshop will be quite good for us to explore those elements and be aware of the risk. Because if let's say major earthquake hits us, then that's it. Yeah. We also need to think about central government funding in event like this. We have the MACDAM funding up to 60%, be 40%. We've got to think about that as well. So this workshop will be quite good for us.
Appreciate you following the figures though.
Sarah, did you want to make a comment? Then I've got Councillor Gilmore and Councillor Wallace.
No.
Sorry.
I was just going to add to that, we're not the only council that is going through this. Just chatter on our local government group is everyone is pulling quite quickly a strategy session with their insurance advisors to revisit and how do we better in this space, because the costs, as you can see, are substantial.
Thanks, Sarah. It just prompted me. The other thing, Councillor, is the value of the assets. I think it'll be cool the next time you do it, put the value of the assets alongside it, because it will show you that actually part of the increase in premium, part of it is driven from the underlying asset investments that we're doing. With more assets that you have, definitely your premium is going to increase.
Circulate that with competitive information.
It would be good. And I look forward to that strategy, because even as a nation, we have some risk with climate change and events internationally, I think, going forward. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, I found this quite telling, but I thought that we would when we saw it. I just wanted to quickly, it's probably more focused on motor vehicle, which is not necessarily as longer term insurance or the risk and infrastructure and some of the material damage, but I'm not expecting you to have the information to hand, but what might be quite handy is to get an idea of the average claims that are coming through. So, for motor vehicle, we've got our premium here, but how much are we actually claiming every year? Because looking at 2024, I mean, it's sort of not lost on me, 42,000 for our fleet, literally would buy one of our new Suzuki Vitaras. So it's nice to see a couple of modest cars that are new cars that are parked outside there, but that would literally just replace a new car. So I'd be really keen as part of that workshop, I'm sure it'll come up, but for us to be looking at what the risk to us of self-insurance might be.
I was going to just say, through you, your worship, in my time at council, we have had one vehicle claimed where it was completely written off. But we do make claims on windscreens and the likes as well. And we have had the odd claim, but not of late, around damage to vehicles, like minor damage, panel beater stuff.
Yeah. Understanding clearly the risks on that. Yeah. Absolutely. Councillor Johns.
The other thing, we've talked about this before, is that our assets are not confined to a central city or town like most councils are. They're spread between 4 major towns. So if there's an earthquake in Ekatahuna or Dannevirke, it's not going to affect the other ends of the district. So the opportunity to self-insure is far greater for us than it will be for most other councils.
Thanks, Councillor Johns. And I've got a Hikarangi Trench East Coast Lab seminar for you and I to go to.
Don't look at me.
It'll affect you more than me.
I think that'll be big enough for all of us. Raj. Oh, sorry.
Absolutely, and I think it's part of the strategy. We need to look at that. But I think where we are also concerned about is if I draw the example of Cyclone Gabrielle, where we're talking about the next tranche, where we're looking forward for the government, they're telling us you may not get 100%. We think, oh, what's the impact on the ratepayers to fund it? So we are conscious about the loss modeling. I think that's a really good strategy for us to explore. But in the event something happens, the ratepayers need to fund it, and oh, there you go. But I think we need to put it into it, look at it from a risk lens, and how we manage that. And there's ability for us to do self-funding, and also like through the LES, we are doing what we call group funding. And so we are exploring that to say collectively we pull together what we call the loss model at a group level share. So there's an ability for us to manage our risk through not just within our own, but work alongside with the MWLS Council and share that risk.
Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. That's one question I've been on my mind for a little while. It's just regarding Cyclone Gabrielle. Do we have any claim? Did we get anything? Do we claim any insurance for damage on Cyclone Gabrielle? Bridges, roads, fences, anything at all?
We do not insure our roads nor bridges. There was a bit of discussion, I think, at the last LTP about the insurers do not insure roads because they're subject to weather and fair wear and tear. They don't insure. We were looking at bridges, critical bridges, where we wanted to do that, but we paused in a sense that we didn't insure bridges. So transportation, our assets that we insure are in the other three waters, land and buildings.
I'll just follow that up, Raj. Understanding with Cyclone Gabrielle, if I think about the key bridge, and we didn't lose it. Any of those, and I guess I'm just thinking one across the river. You know, that's a significant structure. At Akatio, yeah, that's a significant structure. If that had gone, that's the one big bridge that out of the whole district that really worried me. Oh, sorry, yes, yeah. But Manawatu would have a high chance of being replaced. You know, what would Waka Kotahi say around that one?
We can, but the other caveat is for the roading or transportation infrastructure is we have Waka Kotahi sitting alongside us in terms of funding and the enhanced subsidy. So there's an ability for us to actually lean on them for damage due to emergencies, unlike council-owned infrastructure where you're responsible 100% of the cost. Yeah, but we can, as part of the strategy, we are involving the transportation team, and we could throw it into the mix. How about our critical bridges? Do we want to look at? And you could weigh up the cost benefit risk as well.
Held up well. Okay, right, Treasury headroom.
Page 94. It seems it's got its own section in our reports. It has its own section in many reports. I just picking up on the concern within the community, and I guess I just wanted to talk about why we report on it. And it is they are scary. They can be scary numbers to someone who doesn't deal with these numbers day in, day out. So, yeah. But the reason we report on it is to try and provide that reassurance that it's being monitored. It's something we are making sure that we have those steps in place. And as Beth mentioned earlier around our LGFA covenants and making sure we are meeting them. So I guess I just wanted to just put that out there on a meeting to say, hey, look, yeah, it's scary. It looks scary. I've mentioned it's one of the things that I stew over in the night, but it's there for a reassurance purpose. So this always reassures me, and I think I talked about it within when we were doing a budget cut workshop and what it was looking like for the long-term plan. And I was pleasantly surprised with how we were sort of tracking in that field. So I guess it is a stock standard item. I have got the numbers there. We did briefly touch on it earlier. The numbers haven't moved too much because we haven't drawn down at 31 December the debt to see it change. But what I have tried to give you is what our forecasted debt would be if 80% of our CapEx program was delivered. And also coming back to the impounded supply, in all of our reports, we have talked about that being externally loan funded. So factoring that into the equation as well. Rest assured, there is capacity and it's showing in the tables. And then I've also calculated this out at what we're proposing within the new financial strategy as part of the long-term plan. We see that sort of tracking with us having financial headroom should we need it for an emergency. Is there any questions?
I think it's Sarah, and I guess I don't use the word scary. I know council's very risk averse, but I think today, we talk about planning, we talk about preparedness, and it's understanding that at all times. Okay, right, if there's no questions there, if we move on to the quick facts, and I loved your new ones that you added in there, Sarah.
You can, yeah. Sorry, Ellie. Just taking on board Mayor Tracy's feedback, I will look to include that debt per rateable unit and assets per rateable unit, just to keep it all in context, I guess, because we do talk about the risk and we talk about the negative aspects of what our debt sort of levels are like, but just trying to factor in the reassurance that we're trying to give to our community as well, that it is okay. We are okay. So quick facts. Pulled this from, I think we started this once finance and performance began, really. I've given you actuals as at 30 September because I'm aware we hadn't provided these to you. For comparison purposes, I've given you actuals as we are at December 23. And then I've given you what our year 3 budget or our annual plan budget is. And then for comparison purposes as well, I've given you what the year end for 30 June looked like. Is there any questions? Is there any comments? Any feedback?
You'll add those new debt ones to there, yeah. Okay. They're always a good quick reference guide. Yeah, okay. Right, future work requests and deep dives. So normally if I'm reading something, and I was just checking my iPad then, if I'm reading anything and I think, oh, that'd be a good deep dive or a high public interest, and I make a note on there. But is there any future work requests from the team here that you'd like to see? Or any other questions on the management report? Councillor Wards.
I'd be keen, I'm trying to think if we've had a workshop on it, so I might be asking out of turn, but yeah, I was just reminded when I saw the fact that we managed some money on behalf of, or we were given some money in a trust. I'd be keen to see where some of these trusts, the community trust money that we give out of our ratepayers, so that other parts of our community benefit or can make decisions around it. So I'd be keen in a little bit of analysis in that. Mayor Tracy.
I think some of that, if I'm correct, Councillor Ellison and Councillor Scott, some's coming through the Community Wellbeing Committee. But when I do go through these deep dives, I guess the aim is to actually have a look at one of the reserves, as we go through. So partly for us, but also partly for the general public, so that they understand them, because the Gwen Fairbrother is one that I think is very little known about, specifically to Dannevirke. But now that everybody understands that we can send those messages out in the community, and there's a couple of projects, 2 or 3 that I can think off the top of my head, that could fit perfectly into that.
Makes the decisions around those.
That was an interesting one that Sarah and I discussed. For us, it was both unanimous that they come back to the table to be discussed. It's public money and transparent. So we didn't research into how any of the last ones, because that's quite a long time ago that one was made, but that was the process that we would use. So I thought even I might have a look into some of the other areas and come back to you just with some of the further deep dives going forward. Okay. Is there anything further anyone wishes to discuss in that management report? Thank you, Sarah. That's an incredible amount of work, and we know that you sleep and see this stuff in your sleep as well. It doesn't go unnoticed, and to you and your team, we know you are tuning some hours, and I know these figures do trouble you, as they do every household in the country when we're facing costs that just change and change again every time we go to the supermarket. So it's a tough space to be in at the moment, but thank you very, very much for all your hard work. And I'll close us with our district. Sorry, I thought I had, but okay. Can I have somebody move that be received? Councillor Gilmore, seconded Councillor Chase. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Right, thank you very, very much. And I think next time I go through with the agenda, I'll just put the recommendations under each section, and then we'll have that nailed. Okay. Right. Let the winds of the Ruahine and Tararua give you strength. Let the waters of the Manawatu nourish you. For we are the Pounamu of Te Tāpiri Nui o Whātonga. Kia ora. Excuse me, Resident. Urgent call from a distressed Edith people.